Welcome to the Chairman's Perspective Podcast. Chairman.
Hello and welcome to the Chairman's Perspective, a brand new show here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. My name is Lee Eric Smith and I am joined by my co-host, none other than the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. And we are here to give you some great information, right, Van?
That's right. And let's face it, people are working, people are raising their kids, people are in school. And I know that people don't have enough time to come down to our county commission meetings or our committee meetings. It's just not going to happen. So what we're doing, we're bringing the government to the people. We're letting people know what's going on in county government. And if you can't make a meeting, that's okay, because we're going to give it all to you right here on this show.
And you are exactly right. We're getting ready to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going straight into the weeds. We're going to be talking about crime prevention. We're going to be talking about how do we slow down recidivism among people who are offenders. And we're also going to be digging into poverty some. But all of that coming right up when we come back from this break. Don't go away here on Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN! I'm Cynthia Daniels, host of Grind Set. Are you looking to start a business? Do you need tips on how to scale up? Get it on Grind Set. On this show, our guests will keep you listening. What's your Grind Set? If you happen to miss some of our episodes, make sure you check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast provider.
Grind Set on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN!
Hi, this is Lee Eric Smith here with the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Van Turner, and you're listening to the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of Chairman's Perspective, a weekly program where we'll be bringing you inside the workings of the Shelby County Commission. And I'm delighted to be joined by our co-host, the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner, here on Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Chairman Turner, how are you doing today?
Doing well. It's good to be here with you.
Outstanding. I know we're going to get to a whole lot of things as this show progresses, not just today, but in the coming weeks. And the idea of this show, is, as we kind of put it together, was to give people a different kind of insight into what's going on the county level, what's going on in county government, and just those types of things. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you hope to accomplish with the show?
Well, as you may be aware, and as the listeners may or may not be aware, Shelby County is the largest county within the state of Tennessee. We have almost 1 million people within Shelby County, and when you speak of the surrounding counties, we're more than 1 million. And so essentially, I think that with such a large county, we have so many issues, and we have to discuss those issues. I'm fortunate enough to be the chair this go around, and not only am I the chair, but we have a great new commission. We have 8 new commissioners, and so there's been a complete turnover at the commission level. And for the first time in the history of the commission, there is a clear majority of Democrats on the commission. There are 8 Democrats and there are 5 Republicans.
Wow.
And so at no other time within the history or with the history of the county commission has there been such a majority of Democrats on the county commission. So I think that's important. Furthermore, you have a new mayor who we all know, Lee Harris. He and I attended the same undergraduate, Morehouse. He's probably the youngest mayor for Shelby County. We have a new sheriff. He's the first African American elected mayor. Of course, Otis Higgs was there for a short period of time, but Floyd Bunner was actually elected during a regular election cycle.
As sheriff, yep.
As sheriff. And then you have so many other constitutional officers and clerks who are either African American or women. And I think that that's just something that's historic, and it's something that we should celebrate. But it also means that there's a lot of responsibility on these new office holders. Again, with such a large county, we have so many issues with crime, We have a lot of issues, of course, with poverty. We have a lot of challenges with job growth and economic development. And so hopefully, as one of our co-hosts stated, we want to peel back some of those issues, delve into them, take a deeper look into what's going on within the county.
Outstanding, yes. And I know that Mayor Harris, County Mayor Lee Harris, has come out with a 7-point program, his initiatives, if you will, of what he thinks are the most important issues to tackle. We'll get into some of those today. But one of the first ones that I know, and it's kind of a, for lack of a better term, a triumvirate, if you will, of kind of interconnected problems. You know, you don't really tackle the crime problem without dealing with the poverty problem. You don't really tackle either one of those problems without dealing with the job problem. And all three of those are kind of interconnected. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what some of the initiatives you are that can happen at the county level relative to reducing crime, and specifically, obviously, we're talking about violent crime, I think.
Yeah. Well, of course, we have to invest in our young people, and in doing so, we have to adequately educate our young people, and we have to make sure that when these young people we invest in graduate from high school, there's something productive for them to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, I think, an important initiative the mayor has touched upon, and that's key to the county commission. And so WIN, which is the Workforce Investment Network, is now solely under the authority of the county. I think the city has more or less pulled back, and that now is placed under county government, under community services. And so I think that's going to be really important as it relates to finding jobs. Mm-hmm. What good is it for our young people to be educated, to get their degrees, and then there's no job, or they take their skills elsewhere?
Right.
So making sure that we match young people who are graduating and doing the right thing, as they leave high school, they then are matched with employment opportunities, which is suitable.
And you're listening to The Chairman's Perspective here on the KUDZUKIAN Network with Lee Eric Smith and Chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. So as we talk about, having things for people to do after they come out of high school or whatever, I know there's been something of a push on kind of letting people know that you don't have to have the college degree. Not that we want to deter people going to get their higher education, but we hear a lot of talk about people wanting to amplify, trade and that type of training. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I support it 100%. When I was in school, of course, I attended Whitehaven. We had something called SHOP. I don't even know if they have SHOP now. We had a full auto mechanic garage that's still there at Whitehaven, where when you took auto mechanics, you had the opportunity to actually work on real cars. I mean, people were dropping off their cars, and
I remember that. And
folks were pulling the engines out and fixing them and sticking the engines back in. And it was, it was a great learning opportunity. We had, they actually taught, and I think you still have this in some places, and probably still at Whitehaven, but the women learned to do hair and the men learned to cut hair. And so you were picking up trades right there in high school, so that when you graduated, and if you did not want to attend a 4-year institution, you could start working and make a living, and an honest living at doing so, and do quite well.
And a lot of times you couldn't even, you wouldn't know whether or not you wanted to do hair or whether you wanted to work on cars unless you just had that opportunity. There was a lot of exposure. Right. Just, having those types of training programs in the high school. Yeah,
so I'm a big proponent of these kinds of technical skills being taught in high school, and I think that really gives a great avenue for our young people to work and to make careers when they leave high school.
Awesome. Wow, a lot of good stuff we're getting to, but for now we got to take a break. Listeners, don't go away. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Chairman's Perspective right here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. My name is Lee Eric Smith, joined by the Chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. Don't go away. We will be right back.
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Riffin' on jazz.
When two friends get together to kick it
about jazz, it's called Riffin' on Jazz.
Catch us riffing on jazz every week right here on your favorite broadcast or podcast platforms.
Riffin' on jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
And we're back on the Chairman's Perspective here, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. My name is Lee Eric Smith, one of two hosts joining you. The other one is none other than the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. Thanks again for hosting this show with me, where we get to bring all kinds of good community information about the workings of Shelby County government to people. In our last segment, we were talking some about crime prevention, but there's kind of another leg to that stool I want to touch on. And that's this, that, okay, we know that, however it happens, people find themselves in a situation where they got to check the box on the application. Have you committed a felony, or do you have a felony crime? And a lot of times it's difficult for people who have to do that, who have to check the box to find work. But that creates a whole class of unemployed and underemployed people here in Memphis. What can the county do about that? What can be done at the county government level about that?
Well, there was an initiative, I think, that was really promoted by both the city and the county to ban the box. And so that was one way where, people who've served their time are not stigmatized. And so that's very important. You don't want persons, when they fill out applications, to have those applications discarded because, there's this box, have you ever been convicted? And the box is checked, and then the people are no longer considered. So both the city and the county undertook, I think a very reasoned path to make sure that we ban the box when it comes to filling out those applications when you're seeking employment with the city or the county. I think that's really important as well. And in order to stop recidivism, you have to make sure that people who are ex-offenders have adequate access to employment opportunities.
Right.
And so Harold Collins was just appointed over the reentry program for the county. I applaud Mayor Harris on that appointment. Former Councilman Collins has been in this area of work for a number of years, and I think that was a very good appointment, and I think that he would do justice to the reentry program for the county. And so it also means putting good people where they need to be, and I think that that's a key as well. So, taking away the stigmatization of having people to fill out applications and they have to check that box. Also putting good people such as Mr. Collins in position to make sure that the reentry program is effective. He knows the work. He believes in the work. And I think that he would do justice by that work. And then I think from a third standpoint, we're going to talk a lot, I'm sure, and a lot has been in the news about tax incentives. And so part of one of the good things about these tax incentives is that when these companies come and they ask for tax breaks, we say to those companies, in order to get a tax break, you have to hire so many ex-offenders. You have to make sure that you're giving opportunities to people who ordinarily not have these opportunities. So I think strengthening those programs, making sure that companies, when they seek incentives, when they seek various economic investment packages from government, from the county, that they are reinvesting in our community by hiring people, hiring persons who've made mistakes, they've corrected those mistakes, and they want to move on with their lives. And so when these companies come for these tax incentives, we say to them, you have to reinvest in our community, and by hiring ex-offenders, that's how you can make a change.
Exactly. And you're listening to The Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network, hosted by me, Lee Eric Smith, and the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. I kind of want to go back to this to touch on kind of the people aspect of it, because, we can measure statistics of, how many people come out and how many people go back in. But to me, there's something to be said about you want to give a guy hope. Or somebody who has a history with the criminal justice system, a sense of hope. And if you don't have the proper tools in place, like banning the box where you don't have to check the box on a job application or other programs. I don't know if you can just kind of speak to what it does to a community if you have a group of people, because of their prior record, who don't have hope, don't feel like they can get anything going regardless of how hard they try.
Mm-hmm. Hope is so important that 10 years ago, this country, which once enslaved people of African descent, voted in a black man as president because he had a message of hope. So that's how powerful hope is, not only to individuals, but to this entire nation, and I would even say this world. And so you have to give people hope. That's why we go to church every Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. We go to church for hope.
Oh, now preach.
Yeah. So we have to make sure that people who make mistakes in this community have hope that if they change and they do their time, that there is a way to make a better life. There's a way to provide for their families. There's a way to have that American dream despite a mistake. And so we have to really make sure we are very watchful of what's going on, because when you look at some of these communities and when you see some of the challenges that are there, when you look at the lack of quality education in these communities, the lack of a stable home in these communities, the lack of a good community, and these young people are grow up in these types of environments and they make these mistakes. If they want to do better, if they learn better, they'll do better. They have to have a way out. So hope is so important. That's why we're working hard to make sure that there are opportunities for these young people, that even if they've made a mistake, that there is hope that they can have a job, create a good environment for themselves and their family, provide for themselves and their family, and move on with their lives. That's so important, and that cuts away at recidivism. That allows these young people an opportunity where they don't have to go back into the system. And I think that that's something that we most certainly have to invest in now and continue to invest in the future.
We have to invest in our young people regardless of age, and we still have to invest in people, especially if they've already paid their debt to society. Because so often it's not just the, formerly incarcerated that has to deal with the consequences. We're talking about not just that individual who has his or her own life to take care of, but we're talking about that person's spouse, if they have one, or significant other. We're talking about children who are living and often growing up in a home with only one parent. And all of that, covers the three pegs that we're talking about here relative to poverty here in Memphis and fighting poverty. It's fascinating to me how many of these angles intersect around family and around work and education, and how all of those, if we can tackle one of them, we can get into addressing the last issue, which is poverty, which we'll be dealing with in our next segment coming up. You're listening to Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. We will be right back.
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
R&R on Sports is proud to be on Sirius XM.
So what's R&R stand for?
Real talk and relevant sports issues.
It's racial and relative. We're brothers from the South. We can relate.
R&R on Sports on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN.
And we are back on Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. My name is Lee Eric Smith. My co-host is none other than the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. In the past two segments, we've been talking about crime prevention. We've been talking about recidivism, people who have dealt with or the criminal justice system and are trying to work their way back into society. But underneath all of that, and I want to kind of dig deep into this for a minute in the time we have left, about the question of poverty. We hear people talking about it so much in this city, and at times we hear such sad stories. It seems like we can't, like it's insurmountable, like this is something that we may never solve. But just on the basis of, I refuse to believe that. We have to be able to do something about this. And I'm curious what, your perspective is from the Shelby County Commission.
Well, to your point, I think that is such a crushing, issue here within the community. And poverty is crushing, right? I mean, it crushes out dreams, it crushes out aspirations, it crushes out. We talked before hope. We talked about hope, and so you have to, I think, go in and you have to make meaningful change, and you have to. I think you got to do it in a very productive way. The people who are in these challenged communities and they have these challenges, they still have pride. I recall one time doing a turkey giveaway, and we were at a school, and they asked the young people to come out, which I didn't really want to do, and they wanted to take pictures. And that was very embarrassing for those young people to have their friends see them taking pictures and get this sort of basket. And it was a very embarrassing time. And I felt that for that young lady. And they kept asking her what was going on, what was the problem. I knew what was the problem. You don't want to embarrass people. They don't want handouts. They want a hand up. And so just that one example really demonstrated to me that, although persons have challenges, they are not challenged. There's nothing wrong with them. And so we have to be careful how we approach poverty in this community, and we have to do it with I think a sensitive eye towards treating people as human beings, treating people as having self-esteem and self-pride, and really we're there to give them a hand up. It's not a handout, and we're there to usher them along, to create avenues for them, because if the truth be told, nobody would be where they are in this city had not someone helped them out. I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am now had a lot of people not helped me out.
Right.
And so that was just God's favor. That was being fortunate. That was, just in some instances, the luck of the draw. Having a daddy at the house, right? And so, and so I think that's what we have to keep in mind, and that's how we have to approach this issue. And that's why when we address poverty, we have to do it in a very smart way. And I think that that's what we have to start doing. And we do that, of course, through education, through wraparound services. If these young people are going into homes which are broken and which are challenged, we can educate them all day long. But if mama and daddy are not eating, if mama and daddy got issues, then it doesn't matter, because whatever you do in their schoolhouse will be taken away, stripped away once they enter into those doors at home. And once summer break happens, it all goes out the window. So I think when we look at this, we got to invest in the whole family, in the whole community.
That's what I was thinking about. That we so often we talk about how throwing money at the problem won't solve the problem, because we've seen it. If it was just as simple as writing a check or passing a budget, a line item on a budget, I'm sure we would have fixed that by now. But there are some intangibles to this problem that we have to get at. Want to just pause for a moment and remind people that you are listening to The Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. And I just kind of want to come back to this idea, and this is just my own philosophy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, that we hear a lot about food deserts, in Memphis, and places where you are nowhere near, where you're not even within walking distance of fresh produce or fresh vegetables. And consequently, a lot of people are going without really good quality food if they're eating any food at all. My question is, how does just simple hunger, if we could solve maybe that one problem? I think the poverty problem might be very wide because you get into the education and all of the different angles of it. But I've heard it said that a fed man has many problems, a hungry man has only one. And so I wonder if in situations where you have that young person who's going home to a situation where, maybe there's trouble inside the home, well, at least if you take hunger off of that plate, you don't have to deal with that piece of it too. I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are on that piece. So we throw away a lot of food, and there are a couple of restaurant owners who are in tune with this, and they drop the food off at shelters, and they do other things which are a lot better than just throwing the food in the dumpster, right? And so I would be willing to champion some type of tax incentive or some type of a program which rewards businesses for taking their food at the end of the day
and feeding people who need to be fed, as opposed to throwing it in the garbage. Like, if those businesses, if we count all the restaurants that are in this county, and we say, hey, business, we'll give you this from the county government, this type of incentive for you to go and take that food at the end of the day and feed people who are hungry, feed families who are hungry, I think that's worth it. That's what the government needs to be about. There's a way to resolve it. We just got to figure it out. That's a win for the business, that's a win for the county, and that's a win for that family that's being fed. We don't have to wait until Christmas and Thanksgiving to feed folks. Folks are hungry year round. Right. It's not just the holidays.
I remember seeing that TV commercial where they had people who were giving their food away, for Christmas, and then they showed, like March. Like, okay, where's the food giveaway now?
We're still hungry.
Right.
And there's also the pop-up fresh produce vans. I just saw that, I think, on the news, and I want to explore that more. But having, like, fruits and vegetables in these trucks, food trucks that go into these different communities, and they open up shop, and people just can walk out from their homes down the street and get the food, the vegetables that you and I grew up on. I mean, I'm still, I'm born in the 70s, so I still shuck peas and have fresh corn. My family is down in the Mississippi Delta, so I still remember going down to Indianola, Mississippi, Sunflower County, and getting some good food. They pulled it right from the earth. The greens were growing in the backyard.
Tastes good.
The corn was just right down the street. We had the beans and all those things. Natural food. Not a lot of additives, not a lot of chemicals, and that makes a difference. And that makes an impact. And so when you're in a community and more than 80% of the young people on free and reduced lunch, there's an issue. When these children go hungry because school is not in session, that's an issue. And I think one way to figure it out is supporting these food trucks with the fresh produce that are going into these food desert communities, and incentivizing these businesses to not throw away their food, but to go and feed these families in these communities which are starving, literally starving. I think are two good approaches that we should support, and I think can support from county government.
Excellent. And what a way to put a cap on this, our first edition of Chairman's Perspective with the chairman of the Shelby County Commission, Mr. Van Turner. My name is Lee Smith. You've been listening to Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
The Chairman's Perspective podcast with Van Turner on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
I like the way he said funking around.
Yeah,
that's what they're doing.
I did like that, but he said the older.
I'm gonna start using it.
He said the older electorate is funky.
Well, basically, it's what he's saying. He's saying that
midterm elections funking around,
and that's true
with our future.
Because it's noted. And I think you're absolutely
don't let
midterm elections.
Don't let them funk up the future.
Oh my God!
On the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Well, as promised, I think we delivered. We got into the weeds. We peeled back some important issues in this community, and this is just the beginning. Isn't that right, Brother Smith?
Exactly. And one of the things I think is going to be great about this show is what we're trying to do is not just talk about all of these political issues like, you're watching the news channel all the time. We want to bring it down to the base level and show how some of the things going on in Shelby County government will affect your everyday life on all levels. And so we're looking forward to doing that every week right here on the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. We'll see you here next week.
The Chairman's Perspective podcast with Van Turner on the KUDZUKIAN Network.